Hey guys, welcome back to my tutorial videos, and today we're going to be talking, that was the worst introduction ever, I'm sorry. But today we're going to be talking about Inferno Pools, which is a new map that they have introduced. This is one of 4 that I'm going to be doing as far as videos for the new ladder map pool, considering they are introducing 4 new ladder maps, and if I made it all into one video it would be a million miles long. So just as we talk about every single time, removed our King Sejong Station, Overgrowth, Merry-Go-Round, and Nimbus. So those maps are gone, and the new ones that we got will be introduced by myself. So let's talk about it. So this time we're going to be taking a look at a map called Inferno Pools, which we talked about, or rather we mentioned it, and it's in the title of the video. You should know what we're talking about by now. Just some general things that I noticed on this map. This map is huge. It doesn't look that big by the picture, but it actually is enormous. The time it would take you to walk from... oh, that's not the right color. The time it would take you to walk from here to here is a ridiculously long amount of time. And more importantly, the time it would take to scout on a pattern such as this is really long. So this is going to be a strange map. It's almost like the new Alterzim Stronghold, if you remember that map. But I will say that there are definite close spawn positions. Say if you spawn here, your enemy could spawn right there, and this is not that far of a distance. More importantly, there's no map architecture to break up the travel time between these two, unless you count these top of the areas on the gold right here, but there is enough space for them to just kind of skirt around if you're trying to control that. So close spawns are a thing, and I'm actually almost expecting them to remove this like they typically do, but we're going to talk about this assuming that they're not. So this is probably the map that has the most variety of third bases, and it's obviously dependent on where your opponent spawns and what race you're playing. So third base options, by the way, this is your main spawn. Third base options are somewhere here. You could take the gold if you're feeling adventurous, and it would be fortuitous in some circumstances. Maybe say Terran versus Zerg could be a thing. And there's also an island expansion back here. And no, these aren't connected, that's just a weird piece of scenery that kind of makes it look like it. So there is an island map on here, which we will talk about. A couple of other random things to talk about this before we get into matchups is that this natural area is enormous. I know that doesn't usually matter too much, but reporting to things like all-ins are going to be a big problem for Terran especially, because if all their production facilities are back here, this is actually a really long walk down to their base, and if a Zerg were to spawn here and do an all-in, it's going to add a decent amount of travel time onto Terran units that are going to want to come down there and get into bunkers or defend all-ins and stuff like that. So that could be close spawns between these two races, especially Terran versus Zerg is going to be a big all-in fest, I think. But we'll just have to see. Long distance spawns won't be as bad, but still, the natural area is huge. Not really sure if that matters a ton though. The maps will be, this map is huge like I talked about, but you'll notice there's actually not that many bases on it. There are smaller maps with more bases on it than this, so the distance between these bases is actually pretty big. So here to here to here is about maybe double the size as it was on smaller maps, say like Shakura's Plateau, which I know is really old but was just recently in the map pool. So these bases are deceptively far apart. So I think taking a 4th base, especially on this map, is going to be craziness. It's a huge map, so if you don't see your opponent coming, you're going to run into a lot of trouble. So scouting, holding these watchtowers in the middle is going to be a really big deal. So it's all about just who knows what's going on versus who has, say, the better army or the better positioning or whatever. Just knowing what's going on is going to be a big thing. Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and jump into matchups now. PvT, as I have it highlighted here, I think Terran is favored, but we'll talk about it. This is somewhat spawn dependent in the sense that if the distance between here and here is so long, that naturally favors Protoss a lot of the time, but at the same time, that's a circumstance where I feel like Terran could get away with taking greedier bases or maybe taking an island and not letting the Protoss really do much about it. There's a lot of dead airspace and there's really huge bases, so these base sizes are enormous, meaning that once again, if you were Protoss and you were standing here and you're trying to maybe protect your third base, which is here or something, it's going to take you forever to report back to drops. So multi-pronging and drops are going to be a huge deal, especially depending on where Protoss decides to take their bases. If Protoss decides to take a gold, these are ramps heading up, so if the Terran ever gets the position up there, then the gold is forfeit. Trying to take an island is going to be a bad idea because drops are really easily going to swing in there and deal a lot of damage. It just kind of feels like the only fortuitous spawn position for Protoss is actually here if the Terran is there. So vertical spawns seems like the most fortuitous way for Protoss to defend, considering they could probably get away with taking a gold, or they could probably get away with taking an island, whereas otherwise they wouldn't be able to, because if they were able to hold watchtowers or put pylons down, the Terran would have to take really long routes to try and drop on an island base or something like that. So this is going to be strange. I'm not quite sure how that's all going to work out. On the other side, if you're Terran, I think taking an island base is going to be really easy. I actually think taking a gold is going to be easy a lot of the time, because if the Protoss tries to kind of sit up here, then you have really good spots to sit your Vikings. There's actually a lot of space here. These spots are really wide open, so you have a lot of attack angles that you can attack from, and there's not a lot that Protoss can do to try and constrain surface area. So I think Terran expansions are going to be really easy to manage on this map. I also feel like Protoss is going to be pigeonholed into Phoenix Colossus because of the fact that they're going to be so tempted to take this island that it seems like Phoenix are going to be the only way to try and deter drops when they need to be covering here and here. And the map is big enough to where Phoenix Colossus could kind of work, but the other problem is that if Protoss ever tries to take this frontal base, SCV pulls are going to be basically automatic, because this is a huge ramp, and this is also a pretty big ramp. So if Terran were to actually swing part of their army down here, bring the SCVs down, and just bum rush them from both sides, I don't feel like there's a lot of ways Protoss will be able to hold big SCV pulls if they try to take an exposed base. So overall, I would say Terran very much favored in TVP on this map for a variety of reasons. Yeah. So let's talk about ZVP, which is our next matchup here. By the way, I know I didn't mention these details, but they'll become very obvious as I start to do more of these videos, but whatever. This island base is actually a really interesting component of this, because most of the time in ZVP, if the Protoss wants to take a third base, it's all about trying to defend that. But if they take this one, then all of a sudden Zergling plays don't matter, Roach plays don't matter. Then they can start switching into more of Sky Toss play, which I think will be encouraged by that island base, especially with the distance on the map for most of these spawns. I think Sky Toss is actually going to be fairly common, especially considering Mutalisk plays could be really good considering the huge amount of dead airspace that's pretty much all over the map. So I'm guessing if there's going to be a map out there that just encourages a lot of Sky Toss, this is probably going to be it. One thing if you're a Zerg that you probably don't need to worry about is that force fields will not really be a thing on this map, considering these openings are huge. They don't look that big, but when you're on the map they feel enormous. So I don't think big force field plays are going to be that big of a deal. I would say most Zergs are probably going to expand up here, and they're going to have the virtue of all this open surface area to deal a lot of damage with their speedlings, speed roaches and stuff like that if you ever get a Protoss that wants to all-in you. So as much as it feels like Zerg is in decent shape on this map, I feel like Protoss are actually going to find a way to dig out new builds that we haven't really seen before and start to get an advantage. It mostly has to do with the size of the map. Just because if you're Zerg and you're trying to rally stuff all the way across, Protoss has warp-ins, they're going to have a lot more stuff there by the time you get there, so if they run a lot of standard blink stuff, they might even be able to hold on to gold bases and stuff. May be kind of a big risk to try and attack a Protoss if you're not sure what's going on. I'm also going to say that if Protoss ever gets a fourth base, that's probably where the game is really going to change. So usually PvZ is about if the Protoss can take a third base or if they want to at all. So say you're Protoss and you expand there and there. That's your third base down here. If you're ever able to control enough to take a fourth, whether it's here or here, I feel like you don't actually have that much to cover if you already have a huge army. So I feel like if Protoss ever gets a fourth base, Zerg is going to have a really hard time dealing with it, especially considering swarm hosts are not going to be much of a thing on this map, considering what huge open alleyways there are to pretty much any base, no matter where you're going from. This map seems a lot like Nimbus on the surface, but it's actually a lot bigger. It's a lot more open than Nimbus is, and you're not really expanding toward your opponent the way you were on Nimbus. So this is, I have to overall say that Protoss is probably favored in PvZ on this map, but we're going to have to see, because this is a map we're going to see some strange builds come out on. Namely, Sky Toss is going to be a thing. Alright, TVZ. This can be very spawn dependent, because if the spawns are close, like we talked about, I feel like Terran has a pretty big advantage in that, considering they can just walk across. But like we talked about as well, all-ins can definitely be a thing, because if the Terran has to walk really far just to get down to where their defense point is, and Zerg can come in there with a really strong all-in, then all of a sudden they have a pretty decent advantage in that sense. Like I've mentioned before, all-ins will probably be pretty common on this map, so you'll have to look out for that a lot. I also think that Zerg Mutalisks are going to be the biggest thing that's going to kind of dictate how the game is going to flow on this map, considering there are so many places for it to fly in, and especially for Terran drops. If Terran's trying to drop everywhere and send in multi-prong from all over the place, Mutalisks being able to run back and forth, whereas this is actually not that big of a surface area if you're Mutalisks, but they'll have a lot of freedom to walk back and forth, considering the distance is so large between the bases. So Mutalisks are going to be a big deal on this map. I also feel like we're going to see more mass Hellion plays come back on this map from Terran, considering if Zerg tries to take this as their third, which is probably going to be the most common thing to do, considering they just flat out can't afford to take that, because Hellions will just sit up here and they'll deal all sorts of damage. I feel like this is probably going to be the Zerg third. This is probably going to be the Zerg fourth, unless the Terran spawns here. I really doubt Zerg's ever going to take the gold on this map, but we'll have to see if they come up with some weird strategies. But overall, the raw distance between the bases most of the time, whether it's this spawn or that spawn as far as walking distance, is going to favor Zerg most of the time. So I'm giving Zerg the slightest of slight edges in this matchup on this map. So let's quickly touch on the mirror matchups. PvP is going to be super hard to scout a lot of the times, but this is a fairly safe map. It's a pretty big map, so you're probably not going to see a lot of all-ins or crazy builds. Blink probably won't be a thing, because there's actually not very much surface area, and if Blink has to try and attack here and fail and walk all the way back around, it doesn't really work. So it's going to be kind of hard to scout, but for the most part it's going to be fairly safe. The later game compositions are going to be weird. Colossus could be really good, or Immortal, Zealot, Archon could be really good. Overall, I'd say Immortal, Zealot, Archon is probably going to be better, but Colossus builds that stay fairly low on Colossus and maintain more aggression, say with Warp Prisms, and multi-prong attacks to try and take out extra bases, are going to be really strong as well. I also think that Stargate's going to be really good on this map, again, because Blink is not really going to be a thing. So, TVT. TVT is going to be craziness on this map. This map's going to be a lot about drops in TVT, especially Doom drops. So you can imagine if you're Terran and you're sitting right here trying to defend, maybe you're trying to take an island base for a third, or maybe you're trying to take this one. 5 or 6 medevacs all coming in right here, it's going to take you an eternity to report to that. And likewise, if you try to do the same to your opponent. I feel like this is just going to be a non-stop drop aggression matchup in TVT. I also don't feel like defensive tanks are going to be that good, because if you're trying to set up positions, say out here or something, to defend, the other guy that may be running bio or whatever else, or drops, they have tons of opportunities to either walk a different direction, walk around the side, or even just fly in from every different direction as well. So I feel like tanks as a defensive unit are not going to be a thing. So if you really want to win TVT on this map, you need to just out aggro your opponent. And lastly, mech's probably really bad on this map, so it's just probably going to be straight up bio versus bio, maybe some bio tank mixed in here and there, but the tanks again are not going to be that important because of how easy it's going to be to circumvent them. ZVZ seems fairly standard as well. I think Roach versus Roach is an inevitability. If it's close spawns here, you're going to get into crazy baneling wars, so be prepared for stuff like that. But if the spawn distances are really far, once again, it's going to take forever for your Roaches to actually rally there, and all their hatcheries are going to be really close. Especially the gold hatchery is going to be producing a lot more, considering I don't think we're going to see a lot of islands taken in ZVZ. I think it's going to be mostly gold bases are taken, and then fighting over this position right here. But for the most part, the defender still has the advantage, because the defender can just kind of post his Roaches up here if he knows you're coming. He can sit his Roaches in nice concaves on several different areas that are leading into different parts of the map. So I think this is going to be a lot of Roach versus Roach, unfortunately, on this map. I also think holding a fourth base is going to be pretty hard on this map as well. I mentioned that I think the Zergs are going to probably take golds as their fourth base in ZVZ, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to circumvent the watchtowers and go in unusual patterns. So you might wind up getting bases sniped all the time. So It may be Roach versus Roach, but I think it's going to be a pretty chaotic Roach versus Roach because of the distance of the bases in general. And I also can't see many late game evolutions coming up on this map. Things like Swarm House, Ultralisks, anything weird like that. This is just not the map for that. This is a map where people will roach each other to death pretty much without question. So overall, I would say this is actually pretty okay for all races. You'll notice they all have a win here in their matchups, at least according to how I think they're going to play out. The benefits for each race, Protoss has a big advantage because of the raw map size. It's just huge from side to side. Terran has an advantage in a lot of ways because of the different drop paths and different attack paths that they can take. And also Zerg has a decent advantage because of the big open areas that they can fight in, both against Zerg and against Protoss. Namely, just this kind of section here is going to be a haven for Zerg to take fights that favor them a lot of the time. So, pretty even map. I don't think this is a map that any race is just going to have to flat out veto. So, overall, fairly interesting map. I hope you guys at least enjoyed the breakdown that I provided. The final map pool, which I'm going to list in every single one of these videos, is going to be Deadwing, Catalina, Foxtrot, Expedition Lost, which I just talked about in the previous video, Inferno pools, which is the one we just talked about today, Secret Spring, and Vanai Research Station, which, again, I don't know how to say that first word. I think it's Vanai, I don't know. Vanai seems right. But I'll be making videos for the next 2 maps here very soon, so look out for it. Thanks for checking out this one. Hopefully you see us stick around and subscribe to the channel. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.